We're live. All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the House Environment Committee. We will be hearing on a couple topics from Matt Chapman. The first is H652, relating to wastewater discharges from landfills. Welcome back.
Thank you. So for the record, I am Matt Chapman. I am the Director of the Waste Management and Prevention Division. I guess it's probably also with this testimony good to note that I do a lot of the cross-media coordination within DEC on PFAS related issues. So hopefully I can help you out with your deliberations on this bill. I think there's a couple sort of points that maybe were mentioned the last time you had testimony, but I think they're good to reiterate. The Agency of Natural Resources has basically tested every wastewater treatment facility in the state of Vermont, both the influent to those wastewater treatment facilities and the effluent coming out of them. Both the influent and the effluent have detectable levels of PFAS in every one of those wastewater treatment facilities. There's no wastewater treatment facility that has non-detectable levels of PFAS. Many of them have concentrations that are higher than the drinking water standards that we currently have. We're in the process right now, taking a section or several of those wastewater treatment facilities and looking at their collection networks and trying to go up into the system to really figure out where the PFAS is coming from. So again, we did this with a couple of wastewater treatment systems several years ago, and we're sort of expanding that effort to get a better understanding of what the sources of PFAS are in wastewater systems. But our belief is, based on the data we've collected and what other jurisdictions have collected, that most wastewater treatment systems, one of the primary sources of PFAS to those wastewater treatment facilities is coming from common household products, detergents, water from your washing machine when you wash your clothes, basically the PFAS that we have in everyday items that we use in our homes that end up getting washed out and discharged into wastewater treatment systems, and frankly, equally concerning, into your septic system if you live in a rural area. What do we do with that? Well, so this committee has been a partner with the agency and the state trying to ban PFAS in consumer products, and that's probably one of the best things we can do to both limit the levels of PFAS going into wastewater treatment facilities from sort of you and me, but also going into the landfill, because the landfill, much like the wastewater treatment facilities, is sort of a passive receiver of PFAS. They don't use it, they don't generate it themselves. They generate it by the things that they collect and from society that get put in to the landfill. So I think we're saying, so New England Waste Services of Vermont, the Coventry landfill, is a complex facility. It has a bunch of permits: a solid waste permit, an Act 250 permit, an air permit, and a pre-treatment discharge permit. And that pre-treatment discharge permit authorizes what they do with their leachate, and it also puts the requirements for this pilot treatment project that you all heard about last time on the facility, and sort of lays out what the requirements are, what they have to do, what data they need to collect, how they report that back to the Agency of Natural Resources. Under that pre-treatment permit, News VT does not have the ability to discharge to the Newport Wastewater Treatment Facility. They would need to come back in and amend that permit in order to be authorized to do that discharge. Let's see. So I guess it's worth saying that the installed, and you've heard this, the installed treatment system is resulting in significant reductions, up to high 90% removal efficiency of PFAS compounds in the leachate from the facility. And then, just so you're aware, all of this data, and the reason we're conducting the pilot study, is because there are two ways in the water quality world and the clean water discharge world we could regulate something. We can regulate them through criteria in the water quality standards, sort of the numeric standard at the end of the pipe. We can also regulate things through what's called a technology-based effluent limitation. And that technology-based effluent limitation is basically the agency looking at a specific industrial sector and saying, this is the appropriate cleanup or removal technology for these types of discharges. So use this treatment technique or approach when you're dealing with, in this case, leachate. So the intent is that we will take the data and the information that's been gathered from this project and use it to develop a technology-based standard that will apply to all other leachate generating facilities in the state of Vermont. And just so you are aware, that's 6 other landfills and 20 transfer stations in the state. Just sort of getting positionally to things. Yeah, ANR has some concerns about creating a prohibition on treated leachate going into surface waters. We basically we think that we're doing a good job. We have a permit that is on this facility. It requires a treatment technique. We're getting high levels of removal efficiency. And we don't think that after you've treated something, you should then prohibit if it's been authorized to be discharged into, right? So it's basically, there's no such thing as zero in the world that we live in. This is achieving very high levels of removal efficiency. And we think that if the technology is appropriate, it ought to be allowed to go forward. We're concerned about water body specific prohibitions. If the legislature decides they want to prohibit these types of discharges, frankly, we should be having a conversation how we manage and eliminate discharges to all surface waters, not one specific surface water body. And then I guess I would say that lastly, and I think it was mentioned, the use of innovative treatment techniques on emerging contaminants, not just at places like News Vermont, but at wastewater treatment facilities or industrial discharges or other sort of places, is challenging, right? Because our permitting programs are created to basically permit and authorize something that is permanent, right? Like that you're basically putting it in and it's going to be there forever. But a lot of these pilot or innovative approaches, they're intended to go in, be there for a limited duration, look at them in a pilot type scale and see whether they work outside of a university or a limited setting. And our permitting systems are not really built to do that. The agency supports H-152, which is a bill introduced last session in the biennium that gives the agency more flex. It still requires permitting of those pilot systems, but gives the agency more flexibility when we do that permitting so that we can be nimble and adaptive to the types of new technologies that are coming in and being used in these types of facilities. And that sort of concludes, and I'm happy to answer any questions about PFAS generally or the bill before you.
Thank you for your testimony. That brings a couple questions to my mind. One is, we've heard it's been taking a long time to get this air permit for the R&D piece of what the folks at the landfill would like to be trying for. Well, can't think of the word they use, but anyway, incinerating, disposing of the leftovers after they do their pretreatment. So just wondering, like, what's the holdup on the permit? And like, it sounds like it's been a long time. I don't know the timing, but they said it's been a long time coming.
So my understanding is part of this is the landfill is one of Vermont's few Title V facilities. That means it's a major air emission source. The small contribution of emissions from this system factor into the larger Title V permitting process. Again, this goes back, I think, to the importance of having more flexibility in a pilot setting where we can allow these types of smaller discrete, limited duration pilot activities to move forward while we're also working on a parallel track with the larger, sort of longer term permitting issues that are out there. And I think honestly, the air permit is probably a good example of where flexibility would have served the agency in that particular instance.
Because an R&D permit would have gotten it out of the federal regulatory framework, Title V?
It would have allowed the very discrete and limited emissions from this pilot system to move forward while the larger issues associated with the Title V permit sort of moved in parallel with it.
And I guess I have a hard time understanding, so the R&D permit, what is it short circuiting? And if I'm a neighbor, why am I supporting that?
Let me pull up H-152.
No, it's not done yet, but like, I'm just curious.
Sure. I mean, so I think that it is intended to, and let me actually get the language up and but it's intended to basically authorize or allow for limited duration permits that the agency would need to review, and there would be notice and comment on them. It just, again, would not be the type of notice and comment that a full permit would have. So, and all of that sort of, it's laced out in the in H-152 about the scope of what the application requires. It's still a permit. It's just not what we normally go through for a full scale operating permit for a wastewater discharge or a landfill permit. Again, our permit systems are created for sort of these longer duration, 5-year, 10-year permits for facility operations, as opposed to a 6-month, 12-month limited operation of a treatment system nested within sort of that larger facility.
Thank you. Do other members have questions? Yes, Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, how does the post-treatment discharge of the leachate from the landfill compare to every other wastewater discharge facility around the state? Is it comparative?
The concentration of PFAS in the leachate after treatment is in many cases lower than the effluent from many wastewater treatment facilities. And I haven't sort of lined them up and looked at what percentage or what we're talking about, but as I think was said in last week's testimony, if you look at the discharge in Montpelier, it represents a very, 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 very small fraction of the total PFAS load in Montpelier's wastewater discharge after treatment.
We're focused on the PFAS. Leachate's probably got some other things in it that influent and effluent at a regular treatment plant doesn't have. But how do we know what those things are? And does the pre-treatment help get those out, or is it really just PFAS?
Well, so this particular pre-treatment permit is focused on PFAS and then in making sure that the leachate goes to a wastewater treatment facility. The wastewater treatment facility is going to pick up some of the contaminants, but I hope everyone in here understands, the technologies that we use in wastewater treatment. They're good at dealing with pathogens and metals and some other things, and less good picking up some of the more complex chemicals that go through in wastewater, right? Pharmaceuticals or other things. So I'm certain that there are things in leachate, things that we likely aren't even testing for, that end up getting in that effluent or in that leachate that it ultimately ends up getting discharged. It's a challenge, I think it's fair to say. Things like metals and other things, wastewater treatment facilities are that's part of the reason why we send them to the wastewater treatment facility to deal with EOD and some of the other sort of things that wastewater treatment facilities are good at treating.
Final questions on H652? Yes, Representative North.
Good Chair. Thank you, Matt, for coming in. So clarify for me, if this bill passed and what it currently agrees, what would it prevent or what deleterious consequences, side effects would it have?
So I don't know that this represents beyond the precedent it sets with the legislature coming in and prohibiting a treated discharge into a single water body. I'm not sure that practically it changes anything right now. Right now, News VT, the landfill doesn't discharge into the Lake Memphremagog watershed. So it would mean that it would be discharged into the Lake Champlain.
Based on the testimony I've heard from you thus far, it sounds like you're already meeting.
No, well,
You're not
yeah,
discharging.
yes, they're not discharging to the Newport
Right.
wastewater treatment facility, correct?
That's a requirement of existing permits.
Correct.
So this really doesn't change. And
Well, I should say that the existing permits authorize where you can take the leachate, and Newport is not one of those places.
That's their Act 250 permit, not the ANR permit.
The pre-treatment discharge permit authorizes what facilities you take the leachate to.
So that was an ANR
It
requirement.
is. And also an Act 250 requirement. It was also there's a moratorium was placed in the Act 250 permit.
Further questions?
one more, and that maybe this isn't the right, maybe you're not the right person to ask it, but it just in reading the text, the new text that's being added on, starting at line 19 on page 5. The first sentence only refers to leachate. And that seems like the primary sentence in the new section K1, no person shall discharge leachate from a landfill or solid waste management facility. But then the second sentence changes the subject to the prohibition of the discharge of PFAS into the water of the Lake Memphremagog watershed includes. I'm just wondering why the change from leachate to PFAS, and then the third sentence goes back to talking about leachate again. If we just continued with the same subject, leachate, rather than leachate, PFAS, leachate, this is not what we're really trying to get at.
So
He's not the drafter.
I'm not the drafter, but I will note that I noticed the same issue and wondered if the committee were to decide to pass this bill, you might want to consider addressing the very issue Representative North raised, because I'm not certain how someone might interpret the sort of prohibition on the discharge of PFAS that's sort of nested in the middle of that sentence.
Why is that?
There. All right. Thanks so much for your testimony. on
Welcome.
this. And then we're going to shift gears.
Years.
Our PRO for redemption, bottle redemption PRO.
So I'm happy. I mean, I have listened to the testimony the committee has taken over the past few days. I mean, I think that from the agency's perspective, we support the bill where it is now. We support the changes with respect to the timeline and also the flexibility with respect to either increasing or decreasing the number of redemption opportunities. And I think it was raised sort of late, but I think it's a very good point. There are lots of areas, especially in Chittenden County, probably in Rutland City, many places in Chittenden County where you have a number of retail locations placed right next to each other, right? And where would we want to have reverse vending machines? In the Hannaford's, it's next to the Shaw's that's next to another store, and the sort of density in that. And so having some flexibility there while at the same time making sure that places in Orange County and Essex and Orleans County have the sort of distribution of facilities that we think is important. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions with respect to where the committee has on the bill.
Yeah, thank you for that. I guess, we're hearing from redemption centers of the concern about sort of the uncertainty of the changes and the uncharted territory that we're headed into with the setting up of the PRO. And We've tried to put some bounds around that by investing in existing facilities or utilizing them. And we've taken testimony that the largest ones for sure will be where they're working with redemption centers, presumably to hopefully come to an agreement that's good for both of them. I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of that, the redemption center fears.
So I guess a few things. One is that before I came in, I checked with our analysts, who basically is our conduit for information sharing between the redemption centers, and just asking, have we gotten any concerns from people calling in, asking where the bill is at? And we have not. And so, I mean, I want to say that the concerns that were raised are not illegitimate, right? Like, I mean, this is change, and change is difficult. And I think that to some degree, we're looking at creating fairly significant systemic changes to how the bottle bill is approached. On the other hand, I think that the existing system has a lot of challenges, and is in desperate need of reform and modernization. And that the only way we start the transition in this system is by creating the PRO and telling it to go out and come up with a plan and create certainty where currently there is uncertainty, right? I mean, I think there's the challenge with any EPR program is that you start with not having a system in place. In this particular case, we have sort of a legacy system that we're trying to make better. And so I certainly don't want to either discount the concerns, because I think the world will be different after this system is in place. And I hope that it's different in a better way for everyone, including the gentleman who testified.
Questions for Matt on the redemption PRO? Representative Austin.
Just help me understand how possibly putting this gentleman out of business makes it better. Because I don't understand it enough to see how that.
Well, I guess I would say I don't know how this puts him out of business.
Okay.
So, I mean, it requires existing infrastructure to be used to the maximum extent possible. It requires investments in automation and technology by the PRO, and it requires fair compensation for redemption centers for the services that they're being provided. And I think that I'm recognizing that the world that exists tomorrow is going to be different than the world that exists today. But I think even the gentleman who was testifying recognized that the existing system isn't working that great. And that changes probably need to come. And I think that the challenge, of course, is that, if you step back and look at things from a macro sense, I think it's actually much worse than when you look at it in any individual situation, because you look at the system as a whole, and you're not, I guess I would just say from the agency's perspective, we're not giving Vermonters the level of service they deserve in the existing bottle bill system.
Further questions for Matt on this? Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Matt. One of the concerns from the redemption people was that the current commingling fee of 3.5 cents. The bill proposes to negotiate that between the PRO and redemption centers. And the concern was that could lower even though we want to modernize and enhance, the concern was that the commingling fee could come in under 3.5 cents, and that's where the heartburn was raised. You have a comment on that, or what's your perception of negotiations? Recognizing you don't do policy, but you create rules.
Well, I mean, I think that I think that the system is created in a way that there are going to be, and we talked about this. I mean, the two sort of drivers in my understanding of the two big drivers in how you can make money, or frankly, what your costs are, well, it's space, it's labor, and then it's throughput, right? And all of those things are going to have to get considered when those negotiations take place. I guess I'll just say from the agency perspective, from my perspective, I've always looked at fair compensation as meaning that I'm looking at it as sort of like the same thing as a utility model, right? People need to cover their costs and make a fair rate of return, right? And if they're not getting that, I would expect that I'm going to hear from them. And that's where the agency and its oversight capacity has a role in making sure that the system is fair and it's treating people fairly.
And your perception is that you would be approving plans.
Yes, and I am assuming at the end of the day, there are going to be comments on the plan. There's a comment period. And if individual redemption centers, either through the stakeholder process that's embedded in here before the plan makes it to the agency, or through a notice and comment process that exists during the plan review and approval, if they think the system is unfair, the agency is going to hear about it. And it has a role in basically responding to those issues.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Further questions? Thanks for joining us. Is Casey Harrington here? Members, I guess I'm curious, so just to go back to H652 for a second. People have thoughts on this bill? Just in continuing the conversation, or finished? Still thinking. All right, well, we have it scheduled for discussion. If folks are not ready to do that now, let's take a 5-minute break and see if we can get our witness a little bit earlier.